I now call on Sarah Boyack to speak and move Amendment 169.1.
Thank you very much, Presiding Officer. We on this side of the Scottish Parliament agree that renewable energy is vital to Scotland, the UK and indeed Europe's future. And we are proud of the lead that we gave to renewables developments in Scotland when the Parliament was first established in 1999. The first target I set then was seen as highly ambitious and very bold. But it was based on the use of existing technologies and following the lead taken in other countries. And it was one of the landmark changes that we delivered in the early years of our new Parliament. It laid the framework for early action and much of the development that Fergus Ewing talked about in his opening remarks. There are huge opportunities for Scotland in development of renewables, but saying we support renewables is not the same thing as providing the infrastructure and policy support for renewables, particularly where we're at the stage of the technology still being invented and still being tested. And our marine renewables industry in particular is coming up with exciting developments, but it needs the right support and it needs time. So I very much welcome the Minister's announcement of a route map to be produced. I hope he'll bring it to this Parliament. I hope we'll be able to interrogate that and add our own ideas. And I certainly take the Minister at his words from yesterday's debate, where he gave the opportunity for opposition parties to come forward with proposals that he might take on board as the government. And I certainly will outline one or two in my comments today. One of the things I would ask the Minister to consider as he draws up that renewables plan is to think about whether now is actually the right time to say what proportion of contributions we can expect to see from different types of renewables. I think it was interesting in the Minister's speech that he concentrated particularly on the large-scale renewables, and I think there's a real danger that we underplay the contribution of small-scale renewables at the household level. The work done by the DTI shows that there can be potentially a massive contribution there, so I think we would do well not to ignore that. Over the years, the work that Labour has done in this Parliament, from setting planning guidelines to support the principles of renewable development, our amendment to the Climate Change Act on community-scale renewables and household-scale renewables, shows that we are committed and have been throughout the last 12 years. And we believe that more must be done to secure the maximum direct benefits for communities from renewables developments, whether it's run by communities themselves or whether they get a fair share from the big renewables opportunities brought by private developers. We also support a variety of ownership and management tools, including cooperative actions, and we think that will actually help buy communities in. It will let them have a stake in those renewables developments and not see them being put to their communities. That's why the planning process is so crucial. It won't happen by assertion, however, and the one thing I would say to the Minister as he takes on this new exciting portfolio is that the recent tender for the contracts on the Forestry Commission was potentially a missed opportunity in terms of community renewables. And when he comes to look at designing contracts and designing the tender process for Scottish Water and for other Scottish Government land, I hope he'll bear that experience in mind. If Labour had been elected, or if we'd been in the position to exercise control over the government, we would have wanted to promote renewables, to deliver new jobs, crucially to deliver cheaper energy for consumers and communities, and particularly focus on people with low incomes who are suffering under the current raft of both gas and electricity price rises. There has to be a win-win-win for Scotland, and we've got to make sure that it's not just about expanding the industry, but it's looking at the benefit that's secured, not just by communities, but householders as well. And there is a potential bonanza across the whole of Scotland. We very much agree with the Minister on that issue. There are a raft of potential careers in the renewables industry, building new grid infrastructure, designing the new smart grid, which needs to be developed in Scotland, manufacturing and building the new kit, whether it's going to be on or offshore, installations for household and community scale renewables, designing better and newer types of renewables, particularly in our marine environment. And last week's warning by the International Energy Agency of the continuing growth of CO2 emissions means that we absolutely must step up the link between our renewables and our energy efficiency targets. We need to make sure that we step up the level of investment in green and low and zero carbon industries across the board. And that's why our amendment suggests a range of actions that we think the government needs to take on board, particularly to decarbonise our housing and our transport sectors. That's absolutely vital, and we need to link the renewables opportunities, the energy efficiency opportunities, the zero carbon opportunities and the jobs opportunities. If we're going to come out of the recession creating new jobs, that's got to be absolutely key. So we need to see the policy mechanisms in place. We welcome the new route map that the Minister is mentioning today. That is absolutely vital if the Government's ambitious targets are to be at all achievable, because those targets rest on new industries being developed and new technologies being developed. So we need to look for the early actions that will deliver on that jobs bonanza. Where will the regional training centres be that were mentioned in the SNP manifesto? Where will they be established and how soon? What will the Scottish Government do to speed up the granting of planning consents? Will the Minister act on the concerns of the renewables industry that the resourcing both of the marine licensing system and the onshore planning system is not fast enough? There's not enough resources to deliver the action that we need. That's coming through loud and clear from the industry. What is happening now to make sure that we get the continuing contribution of the skills in the offshore oil and gas industry to plug them into the new renewables that we need in the offshore world? And there's another area where we really need to take forward ambitious action. The Government's action is going to be tested by what it does to deliver. And if you compare the ambition on renewables with the ambition on energy efficiency, there is nowhere near enough ambition on energy efficiency. And that's something I think the Government has got to take on board. In the last session of the Scottish Parliament, although we got a renewables an energy efficiency action plan, the Association for Conservation of Energy point out that the budget for domestic action was slashed by 30%. And there is a link between energy efficiency and domestic price rises. That's why we want to see more action that's practical and that's in the early stages of the Scottish Government. We want to see more use of council tax and business rate incentives for people to install energy efficiency measures. If you look at the new Power of Scotland Secured report by Gareth Hassan, it highlights the important role for energy efficiency. Reducing electricity demand, particularly peak demand, is by far the cheapest way to contribute both to the security of supply and to emissions reductions. So we need an energy and a renewable strategy that completely links in to energy efficiency. And that's why we'd like to see much faster action on community scale and householder developments. That's why in our Green New Deal, in our manifesto, we proposed early action at the local and community level. Until we get a mass market in Scotland, we won't get the reduction of costs that come from greater competition, and we won't get the investment from companies when it's not seen as a government priority. And it is a huge missed opportunity in terms of tackling jobs and delivering jobs and tackling fuel poverty. The new feed-in tariff and the renewable heat incentive that the Minister mentioned transforms the economics for local and householder renewables. But we've got to seize the day on this. When I announced that we were going to deliver 10,000 local developments for housing, whether it was the council house or the housing associations sector, I was dismissed by Alec Neil as delivering a tiddlywink policy, I think he suggested in the Parliament. But the Minister hasn't suggested the Scottish Government's own policy. So that would be the big policy suggestion I put on the table today, Minister. Will you look at the policy we've suggested? It's happening in Birmingham City now. There's no reason why we can't do that in Scotland. If the Scottish Government is to work with local authorities and housing associations, there would be a local jobs bonanza. There would be benefits for particularly people who live on low incomes, who are suffering from fuel poverty. That would make a dramatic difference to people. It would also deliver new manufacturing and installation jobs. And we estimated if you went for 10,000 in the initial years, you would deliver 10,000 training places. So it's a practical contribution to renewables. It would focus on energy efficiency and it would deliver local jobs. And crucially, it would deliver in the early years. All the ambition for 2020, all the ambition on renewables, all the ambition on climate change looks to the year 2020. But we've got to look to the next 4 to 5 years because it's an opportunity we can't afford to miss, but we also need to drive down our emissions now. There are other areas where we think the SNP didn't do enough for the last 4 years of their time in government. We think there were missed opportunities in public procurement, so I hope to see that in the government's new route plan for renewables. And I would be interested in the comment from the Minister about whether you still have a policy on renewables in every school. It was something we lobbied you very hard on in the last Scottish Parliament and we got very little progress on. So where is that policy? Has it been sidelined or is it still active? In Edinburgh, the reality has been deeply disappointing. Renewables moved from the last school programme, and I heard just this month that school students who'd won a prize for new renewables were not allowed to get them in their school locally. So there are barriers to progress, and I hope the SNP government will act on it. The SNP government needs to put its money where its mouth is and make sure that in procurement and school design, that renewables and energy efficiency are built in from the start. And there are other issues where we need to see rapid progress. What's happening with the development of the Bewley-Denny grid? The SNP have now sworn through 2 elections.
The member needs to wind up now, please.
Local people need to know what's happening. We will support the government when it negotiates and works constructively with the UK government on the fossil fuel levy, on the Green Investment Bank and on the Crown Estates Commission, but we'd like to see the results of the Crown Estates Commission brought to the Parliament urgently. This whole Parliament needs to be brought on board and it needs to see what the options are. And we need to see action across the whole of the country so that we get the renewables bonanza that the Minister talked about in his opening remarks. We need less time on new powers and more time on using the powers that you have now. I move the amendment in my name.